26th of February. We are nearing, I believe we're going to have a leap day, aren't we? Going to something like that's coming up here. Um, and uh, and so it's almost the end of February and into political season um, anew because the legislative session in Salem is going to end and filing day is going to hit us before we know it. But we are very fortunate tonight to have with us Stephen Lloyd, who's the state chairman for the Young Republicans of Oregon. And he's been on with us before, sometimes on very short notice. We were a little bit more prepared this time, but we're going to be talking about a lot of interesting topics that are in the news, as well as getting that perspective on what's happening with the younger mindset here in Oregon and across the country. Stephen, welcome to the show tonight.
Well, I always appreciate whenever I get the invitation to come out and hang out with you a little bit, Kevin. And I have to tell you, I'm looking forward to the political season. It's my favorite sporting event. So it's time to play ball.
We're that strange, aren't we?
Yeah.
So, uh, so first of all, I want to tell folks like young Republicans, right? They range from age 18 to 39, and then when you hit 39, it's like the baby New Year is done, right? And then you age out, which I've done
Yeah.
a long time ago, but because I was
Not so long.
well 20 years, but I was the young Republican chair for Washington County way back in 2004, and as well as first getting involved with politics. But what I like about this is we get to renew a new set of leadership that comes out of this incubator, this laboratory that is the Young Republicans. And so, why don't you tell folks a little bit about what that is first, so they know?
So, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about the Young Republicans tonight. Like Kevin said, it's 18 to 40 to get people involved in understanding the political system. And we've got three major goals. It's to recruit, train, and elect the next generation of political leaders for the state of Oregon. And what we want to do is we want to bring a professionalism to the youth coming up, and we want to give them an opportunity to come out there and to serve their community the best they possibly can, and while doing that, becoming the best informed, the best provisioned, and the best experienced people to represent Oregonians all over the state.
Well, and it's inevitably the future of what the Republican Party is going to be. Nearly everyone that you can think of that is some name of notoriety started out in the college/young Republicans, and of course, college Republicans are just those few years that someone's in college. But young Republicans are where they get to go next, and then really it's an opportunity for leadership and an opportunity to have that energetic impact that you want to have right away, not waiting until you've ascended the ranks in a seniority-based system that sometimes the main party can be, but rather an opportunity to try your hand at it. And we've had plenty of people that have gone from young Republican to party leadership and young Republican to running for office and vice versa.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that Lori, she asked a comment, are you seeing any change of independent status to conservative? And I would say absolutely we have. What an independent is it's a person that is not upset enough to join a political party. And so I genuinely, we see it all the time. We also see walkaways from the Democrat Party. And we are more than happy to embrace any individual that sees conservatism and just good old-fashioned American values, and welcome them in with big old open arms for them. So we do see those changes. Thank you, Laura.
Well, it's going to take a while to get us fully into the right direction. However, I think people are getting a super heavy dose in the last few years of the wrong direction. And they're probably getting tired of the promises over and over. And that actually is a good lead into our first story here, which is the state legislature in Salem is discussing the recriminalization of the hard drugs that most people had no idea they decriminalized back in 2020 when they voted for something called Measure 110.
Right.
And Measure 110 happened to coincide with not only the end of the pandemic when it came into force, but also um, the introduction of a new drug that was not that prevalent called fentanyl, and the in a already increasing level of lawlessness that we were seeing following the George Floyd riots and the defunding of police, and of course, many of these prosecutors who have been elected in many major cities in the country who decided that they just weren't going to prosecute petty crime, which they consider drug possession to be. What do we get here in Oregon? We became Disneyland for drugs that kill you. And that's exactly what's happened here. Everybody from around the country has said, I think I'll go to Oregon where there's no consequences and they don't even arrest you when you commit crimes to further your drug habit. Portland being front and center. And of course, you're more than familiar with Multnomah County and Portland in that regard, as am I.
Yeah, absolutely. As being a downtown Portland person, um, you see it every single day. And if you don't have the pleasure of living in the valley here, um, there was a clip on YouTube just recently about this individual who was overdosing on the street, and the Portland Police Bureau and the fire department were down there, and they said, "Look, our hands are tied. The best I can do for this individual is give him a ticket, and then give him resources in order for him to go to get drug counseling." And my question is with this Measure 110 is, who is ultimately responsible for the hundreds of lives that we have lost on the street? You'll never see in the Oregonian or in any of the newspapers or OPB, they're not going to give you the running tally of the lives that we've lost. And genuinely, I feel like the potential, the future, the you know everything that these people who are dealing with living on the streets, and it's an absolute human tragedy. And we see spending abroad, we see spending for war, we see spending on everything like that. And I look at my neighborhood and I just see human tragedy right here. And ultimately, I want to know, and it makes me upset and sad for our country, that I want the people who are responsible for this held accountable. And unfortunately, in this democratic run state, it's not going to happen.
Well, and there's also another dimension to this, which is that people were duped, or at least they feel like they were duped. Many people didn't know that when they voted for a tax on cannabis that was supposed to fund drug treatment and mental health recovery services, they would get the tax, get almost none of the drug treatment mental health recovery services, because we're 50th in the country in that. But they would, by doing that, this obscure category of deadly hard drugs would be decriminalized and turned into a citation, which, interestingly enough, I was down in a small town just outside of Eugene talking to a sheriff's deputy the other day, and I said, so how many of these do you hand out, these citations? And he goes, we don't hand them out anymore. Because first of all, they don't do anything with it. We know that literally only tens of people have been helped out of tens of thousands that have been issued. Yeah. But also he said that the investigative and evidentiary standard that's required to issue this citation creates so much paperwork, so much overhead, that it's simply not efficient for them to hand these out when the person receiving it doesn't do anything with it. They don't pay it. It doesn't change their behavior. It has no consequence for them. So the reform that's being considered in Salem, and supposedly there's some compromise that is being forged, is supposed to make it so that it is now once again a misdemeanor if you are caught possessing these types of drugs. But of course, the two types of people that are caught possessing them are drug dealers who shouldn't be dealing, right? Because that's still illegal. And the second group are people who are using it. And since there's really not I'm not addicted to fentanyl, I just do a little bit of it sometimes, there's no such thing. It's been woven into all these other drugs too. so that when people get cocaine, they get heroin, they get meth. They're actually getting fentanyl too now, and becoming addicted to that. And that is what is killing people. And it says here there is an Oregonian editorial. The editorial board finally broke down and decided to call them out and said, it's clear where the public sentiment is. And that the 2020 initiative that did this decriminalization was a mistake. And see, the bus is leaving the station there. You can hear it right in the background. And the Democrats got to get on board, because they said that as the crisis deepens, they actually have to take this strong step of recriminalizing it. Now, my understanding is the compromise is it's neither a Class C misdemeanor, which would be 30 days and 30 lashes with a wet noodle, and something called deflection, which I know of as a political term when you don't want to be held responsible for something. And it's roughly analogous to that in terms of drug treatment is deflection. And instead of having a requirement that you go and get drug treatment deferred instead of serving jail time. And Class A would have made it a year in jail, and would have added a lot of leverage for them to compel someone to get into treatment instead of just sitting on the street committing crimes and pooping everywhere, and then being subsidized to do so, and overdosing and overwhelming our emergency services with overdoses. All that stuff's happening. This would start to bend the curve on that. Well, apparently they've come up with a new category of misdemeanor, and it's going to be a special one just for this. And some of the details can be read in this article, but the Oregonians actually saying, I think we need to do this. They call it an unclassified misdemeanor, and with the potential of 6 months in jail. It says counties have to set up a deflection system, which users are offered multiple opportunities for treatment prior to arrest as an alternative prosecution, and then traditional criminal justice system. But I don't know what's going to happen with this. I like innovative ideas. What I think is the Democrats who are deciding whether this happens or not, because they run everything, want to spend more money. They want more time to do this, and they don't want to face political consequences this fall.
So the Young Republicans, we had on one of our representatives from Southern Oregon, and he was talking about this. He was talking about the process on how they want to kind of tackle this issue on 110. And I asked the question plain and simple. I said, is there any money that's going to go towards these people being incarcerated for utilizing this illicit substance? And he said, no, there's not really a stomach. We don't want to build more jails. And I have to say, I'm extremely disappointed with this. I genuinely feel if you do a criminal act, you should be held criminally liable for it, and you should spend the time that you need in jail to reflect on it, to have the opportunity to do those drug treatments. And it's just really unfortunate that I'm all for being innovative, but there's some things that just work, and one of them is jail. I genuinely feel that jail time for crimes is a common sense, easy peasy solution for these individuals if they didn't feel that Oregon was such a permissive environment. Because we literally have people that are fleeing other states because Florida's too hard on me. I don't want to go back to that jail. California's too hard on me. I don't want to go back to that jail. And so we get everybody else's problem children, when Oregon should go back to be a place that is beautiful, pristine, clean, wonderful place to raise your kids. And unfortunately, until we really repeal 110 and until we really hold people accountable for their actions, it won't change.
Yeah, and I think that this is virtue signaling by the Democrats running the state legislature, because according to this Oregonian editorial here, they finally say something about, so the grim reality is that more and more Oregonians, 1,268 adults and children for the year ending September 2023, so 9 months of 2023, are dying of fentanyl overdoses, and that's a lot of people. We know a lot of them are in the cities, but not solely in the cities. And we know that it's wreaked havoc everywhere. And then law enforcement has had its hands tied in what it can do everywhere. So, yeah, this is a super important issue. I think that this is one that the Democrats are going to try to run ads saying they tried to solve it, but they are not. I don't think it's going to wash with people because it's actually not going to bend the curve rapidly, not fast enough.
How many beds did they add to capacity in hospitals? How many beds did they add to capacity in treatment facility? How many beds did
Shelters.
they add in the jails?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, and they do like saying they got big dollar figures coming. And all of this is
to
also
who?
a byproduct of solving the wrong problem for the past several years, which is, yeah, there is a housing shortage,
Mhm.
but there's not a housing shortage that is actually responsible for people doing meth intense,
Right.
fentanyl. Um, that's an addiction that won't be remedied in the least way by giving somebody the keys to any kind of home, because they will simply not adapt. They have to do something about the addiction first. But yet this housing first has been the predominant thing. Like, well, we need to solve homelessness, so we'll build housing. And the people who are homeless, 80% of them are addicted or mentally ill. So it's not doing anything.
This whole idea of housing first is ridiculous. You've got regular young people in your life that they can't afford a $500,000 house that needs to be basically completely torn down and renovated, and you're willing to hand the keys to a nice apartment to people who aren't working, who are on drugs, who are, I mean, are they going to take care of the apartment? Probably not. What's the consequence for them tearing it up? Oh, nothing. You can't put them in jail for it. They got a deferment like, honestly, all you're doing is you're creating loops in our system that just cost money and they go nowhere. So I'm for a different solution.
Well, and on top of that, they do have a workforce uh, uh, um, housing shortage in many places in the states. But the cause of that isn't the fact that they haven't spent enough money yet. It's the state's own antiquated land use laws
Mm-hmm.
and rules, regulations, red tape, and bureaucracy that the government itself is throwing in the way of its own efforts to incentivize housing to be built and building it themselves. So there's so many things to solve, but they always seem to be saying, well, the solution to this is we need more money and we need more time. Uh, Grandiose, solutions that have big dollar signs that create an industrial complex, then lobbies for this to last forever.
So
That's where we're at.
I heard they were talking about the reason why contractors typically try to make a project go out longer and longer, and it's to hide the additional cost. And the thing is I genuinely think that if the governor really cared about the lives of these unfortunate people, she would call up the National Guard, she would declare an emergency, and she would triage every single one of these people on the streets, and we could give them food, water, shelter. We could get them what they need, and then take care of the project within a month. We could get these people all the resources they need. But you don't make that kind of money when you've got Central City Concern gobbling up millions upon millions of dollars. You don't have all of these little organizations that it's interesting. Watch the way the funding rolls back to it. I truly wonder where all of this money goes, because I bet if we did an audit, it wouldn't be going to the homelessness or the drug riddled or.
I would add the word independent audit to that too, because having the people running the government audit themselves just ain't getting the job done.
Mm-hmm.
And Lars Larson actually spoke to this housing shortage issue. He said it's a government caused problem.
Yeah.
The government caused a problem and now says it needs infinite resources to fix it, which is very, very reminiscent of another problem we're going to talk about tonight, which is the border.
Mm-hmm.
But for 50 years they've had these laws that essentially imposed this shortage, and now they say they need enormous sums of money to fix it. If you can, the old saying about socialism in France, I remember from years ago, is the way you could generate 20 jobs is pay 10 guys to go dig a hole and then pay another 10 guys to go fill it up. 20 jobs created. That's socialism. It's not productivity, though. And that is the key to a real economy that grows, provides jobs, and gives people hope in the future. Now, here's another story that we'll throw in here, which is that apparently Oregon has managed to achieve an F in its education system. There are reports that are showing the nation's children are recovering from the educational setbacks that occurred under COVID, from Zoom school or sometimes being shut down altogether. But there's an exception. Apparently, researchers have found that Oregon students have failed to regain either reading or math skills since they've come off of this COVID, while other states were on a steady rebound. I am not entirely surprised in a state that already was near the bottom of the nation in terms of high school graduation, a state that decided to just get rid of graduation standards, which has led to people being advanced from grade to grade with the certainty that they'll graduate, but not the certainty that they can read and do math. So this is where we're at. Daniel Bonham, state senator, wrote a good editorial here in the Oregon Catalyst. I'll post that, and I'll also post a story that lays out the details. Out of 30 states, we're dead last in terms of recovery.
Well, I find it really interesting that the teachers union, the state's largest union, that they decided to strike right after all of this when their students needed them the most. Yeah. I find it very, very interesting that, they're able to perform so poorly and still we bend over backwards to give them what they need in order to bring these grades up. I genuinely feel like something has to change, both in the teachers union and in the way that public education works, not to mention school choice and everything else. But I know that the Secretary of State, the last one, Shemia Fagan, was very, very against even putting ballot measures up for school choice. I'm very interested to see what our current Secretary of State does.
Well, and we should keep in mind that we've got an attorney general's race as well, where the one who has the final say in correcting ballot measure titles to make sure they reflect what they truly are. So like Measure 110, Measure 114, Measure 113, but they didn't even get it right. And the Supreme Court said, well, whatever. It's what we think it is, because we can read voters' minds. But then we've also got the well-intended measures that are put up for, say, school choice that are coming up, and others that have come up in the past where they just write the ballot title to make people think it's an awful or stupid idea. And so we have a number of battles that we have to fight. The Attorney General's race with Will Lathrop running on the Republican side against, what's his name, the Speaker of the House, Dan Rayfield, on the other. That's a battle that's happening. And then you mentioned the Secretary of State, and that race is also going to be taking place this next year.
So critical.
It's critical because these guys they run important chunks of the system that helps hold it accountable and provides transparency.
And I just want to go off on a slight tangent. If you're not aware of the Secretary of State and what they're doing with their misinformation, disinformation program, my suggestion is that you learn as much as you possibly can. Basically, they're starting to create a organization they're contracting with a group that's going to be able to basically be the thought police. So look out for that. They're rolling it out soon.
The mis, dis, and malinformation folks are coming after you, but their definition of it is that they don't like what you're saying. And therefore they can just clamp down on it, or that you questioning anything they do, which is actually the purpose of free speech at its highest level, is something they can neutralize and go on the offense, attack people and get them removed who are saying things that might cause someone to question the validity of how an election is being handled. Instead of satisfying the concerns, instead of transparency, which you and I both know is the ultimate key, and we've got to get it from government. So little update, congressional races are going to be very important in this election cycle. Denise Bowles, who was a former Republican state senator, a state legislator, she's dropped her bid in the 6th congressional district. That's to run against Andrea Salinas, the incumbent. Mike Erickson, who was the 2022 nominee, did enter the race, and it does look like that race has narrowed a bit. Looks like the struggle on fundraising was part of that. Which, if you want to see good candidates advance, don't assume, even if you think they have lots of money, that you can just sit there and spectate. You really do need to reach into that pocket and donate that money to these candidates. Or I can tell you that the Democrats will get all the money they need. And that's why, so stop complaining, and don't, I know that there's inflation and there's a lot of things pulling at our pocketbooks, but it's a human caused disaster. And if we don't change who's representing us in Congress, then you can expect to have even less money to do something about this later. And then on the Democrat side, in the 5th district, we have Lori Chavez Dreamer, who's running for re-election. She is a Republican who flipped the seat from Democrat to Republican. It had been several decades, I think 30 years or something. And but she is facing, obviously, a stiff re-election contest. And the Democrats are lining up behind one of the people in the Democrat primary that they like more than the 2022 nominee who lost by about 7,000 votes to Lori Chavez Dreamer, and that was Jamie McLeod Skinner. They are backing Janelle Bynum, who's a state representative, and they want to see her emerge. And so she's been endorsed by Earl Blumenauer, that bow-tied buffoon. I'm sorry, I can't hold back. In the 3rd district, Suzanne Bonamici, the 1st district, Andrea Salinas is endorser, Tina Kotek, Ellen Rosenblum, the Attorney General, former governors Kate Brown and Barbara Roberts. They've all endorsed Bynum. So they're not waiting to see what happens. The Democrats don't leave things to chance.
No,
they jump in and they try to make sure that they put their finger on the scale, because they want a match up between Janelle Bynum, who's African American, state representative, and Lori Chavez Dreamer, the current holder of the seat, who's Republican.
And like Kevin was saying, I really feel like if you feel like your candidate is in a good position, call them up and ask them how they were doing and see how you can get involved. I truly feel that politics is a full contact sport. In Oregon, it's like rugby out here. You got to get out in there. You got to get involved. You've got to go out there and do your door knocking and your phone calling. You really, really push for the candidates that you care about, and push for those candidates that you know are in key races, even if you don't live in those neighborhoods. And yes, we should all be reaching out to Phil Knight and seeing the big money donations to the Republican Party.
You know how you can get Phil Knight to donate? Show that even though it means a lot more to you to donate $100 than certainly even $10,000 from Phil Knight would mean to him. Donate your $100, because he's going to look at that, see the strength, and then he's going to jump on. So that you get to vote actually with your pocketbook, and you can do that for every candidate. We've talked about Monique Despain, who's running in the 4th congressional district, and people are like, "Well, I'm not in the 4th district." Well, yeah, but your money's green, and you know that every member that we get in Congress to add to Lori Chavez Dreamer and to Cliff Bentz from Oregon moves the needle. Not just for Oregon, but it actually makes a difference in holding on to the House of Representatives. And that has made all the difference. All the stuff that we hear about and talk about in the news every day, and we're going to talk a little bit about today, that's happening because we're able to, by a margin of 2 or 3 out of 435, control the House of Representatives.
Yep.
And I know that because of redistricting in several different states around the country, there are some seats we probably will not have in the next election cycle. For sure there won't be. So we have to fight for the ones we can. So we got to look at the 4th district, the 6th district. So 4th district, Monique Despain's running there. The 6th district, as of now, it's Mike Erickson who's running as a Republican. And then we know Lori Chavez Dreamer in the 5th district. And then Cliff Bentz is pretty safe in the second. The first and the third are going to be nutballs. Earl Blumenauer is retiring. He's probably going to be replaced by a new squad member, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost guaranteed in that. And
Yeah.
like Kevin was saying about, making sure that your money counts, making sure that your work counts. If you genuinely are disgusted with the things that happen in Portland, help change the representation in Portland by getting involved in the races. Whether it's, if you live clear on on the eastern side of Oregon, then send one of these reps some donations in order to do the work that they need to do, in order to get more volunteers involved, in order to do the groundwork. You don't need to go out there and knock doors for them. But if you're on the eastern side of the state and you hate the way that Portland affects you on a daily basis, we have the ability to change that.
Yes.
We really do.
And politics is a team sport.
Absolutely.
If we treat it like a spectator sport, we're going to be watching some sad stuff happen later this year. We actually have to step in and get involved. I've always told people our opponents are not the Democrats. It's apathy and complacency. And if we overcome both of those, actually, we're pretty unstoppable.
Absolutely.
So some big news today on the national level. Ronna McDaniel, who is the Republican National Committee chair, announced that she's resigning. She announced today that she'll resign next week after 7 years in the role. She plans to leave on March 8th, 3 days just after Super Tuesday. She has decided to step aside during, I guess it's the RNC's spring training event in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll allow the person who's appears to be our presumptive nominee, which is after Super Tuesday. It's that's when that's when the delegates are all in sufficient number that someone who's running in the Republican primary can't catch the front runner. And right now that does look like President Trump, of course. Nikki Haley's still in the race. She lost pretty badly in her home state of South Carolina. And there was one of the supporter PACs pulled out, Americans for Prosperity Action pulled out. There's others that are saying, you know what, I think the ship has sailed. There are some Democrats that are supporting her, and they're still in. I wonder why that is. But anyway, but the RNC will be led by somebody new. And from what we understand, North Carolina Republican chairman Michael Whatley is the one that President Trump would like to see leading the National Party, kind of clean house. And his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, he has said he would like to see her become the next co-chair. So we'll see how this goes down. There is a bit of a controversy that's also going on inside the RNC, which is that somebody put forward a resolution to prevent President Trump from having, I think it's having his legal fees paid for by the RNC if this resolution passes. So there's a little bit of a stink bomb thrown into the tent here, people discussing this. But we also know that all the stuff that's being done legally to President Trump is pretty much just a Democrat campaign tactic at this point. It's falling apart badly. Some of it is going to definitely be either thrown out, reversed, or dropped as it reaches higher court scrutiny in the coming weeks.
Yeah. I mean, from everything, and I don't know if you've been watching, but the kerfuffle down in Georgia, and is it the district attorney? Is that who it is? I'm sorry, the
prosecutor. Fannie Willis in Fulton County in Georgia, in Atlanta.
What a mess! And I really feel like that situation is very, very volatile as of right now. But it seems like the Democrat Party is really they're trying to bring on this sixth dimensional political warfare against us, literally pulling out all of the stops. I mean, whether they're attacking their political opposition with misinformation or disinformation, or blasting them with erroneous court cases. I would really like to see this chapter of American politics be over with. This is not the way it's supposed to work.
Well, and I think some folks are starting to step up and try to close the door on where we've been and kind of unify the Republican Party. I think this
Mhm.
RNC resignation is part of that effort, as well as to reboot the fundraising, which the National Party needs to do a lot of fundraising. They were really down. They had only about $8 million in the bank as of the end of the fourth quarter of 2023. And that's nowhere near what they need
No.
in order to be able to compete in the swing states. So we're not talking about Oregon. We're talking about like Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, uh, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and to some extent, some of these other states that have been in the fight in the past, Florida and Ohio. But really, the ones I just named are the ones that they expect to swing the election one way or the other. Senator Thune, who's the second ranking Republican, he's the minority whip in the U.S. Senate under Mitch McConnell. He just endorsed President Trump. And I think this is an effort by folks to signal that it's time to move to the next layer. But it's interesting what you mentioned about this New York civil fraud judgment is in the news because President Trump is appealing this.
Yeah.
It is a New York law that allows them, even though no one was harmed, the banks did their own scrutiny, but they claim he overstated his assets, got some loans, paid back all the loans, plus made money for all the banks. So there's no victims in this. And they went ahead and they fined him $454 million and told him he can never do business in New York again. And it turns out that the way this law is written, they can try to say that while he's under appeal, they can force him to find all that money and put it in an escrow that it can be seized if he loses his appeal. And they said he asked for 30 days to pull money together, and they said, no, you have to do it immediately. And so this judge is complete. He's a complete tool. And there's no restraining order on me saying that. Like they're trying to put on him, on President Trump, and saying he can't talk about the case, he can't criticize these guys, which doesn't work anyway.
Yeah.
But and then of course the Letitia James, who is the Attorney General of New York, ran on the promise that she's going to get Trump. She didn't have the crime yet. She just went and said, "I've got the person. I'm going to find some crimes." And that's what she did. And this is what she has done. Now, turns
you
out,
literally cannot legally do that.
yeah, it's against the entire
Against
legal
the
tradition of
law.
the United
You
States.
cannot say, I'm going to get this guy. I just got to figure out a crime. You cannot do that. And like this whole thing of all of these advocate judges across our entire country, we legitimately need to find a good technique in order to expose these people and to vote them out of office. So if you've got a law degree, or if you're capable or competent enough to run for these elected judge positions, please do. We need good, honest men and women with good judgment who aren't going to prejudge like this. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's hugely important. And I really believe that what people are finding is that we don't really have a justice system. We have a political retribution system because judges have left behind impartiality. They left behind fairness and equal justice under the law in favor of, well, I don't like this guy. I think he's a bad person. I disagree with him on everything. And I don't like his personality. So I'm going to throw the book at him. It turns out, however, that this fraud judgment is in clear violation of the Eighth Amendment of the United States Constitution. And there is a 2019 court case, U.S. Supreme Court decision that applied to Indiana, where they did something similar, but actually not even on this scale, not this excessive scale, where they had an excessive fine against somebody in the Indiana court system. And the Indiana Supreme Court said it's fine. And the U.S. Supreme Court, 9-0 ruling written by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, struck it down. And so this is literally going to be a slam dunk appeal just on the Eighth Amendment combined with the 14th Amendment due process, equal justice due process clause. And so this is going to get thrown out. Shame on these guys, because they should have never brought the case. It should have never been brought, because it was already known about this judgment in Indiana in 2019.
I really love that the Democrats are swinging for the fences on all of these major court cases. I don't know if you're a big 2A follower guy, but there's a lot of stuff going through the Supreme Court right now. And I have to tell you, they're reaching much too close to the sun, and it's great for us, because every time they do that, it hits the Supreme Court and they reverse the ruling. And so I'm really happy. I'm so upset that, Donald Trump's got to take those hits for us, but I feel like there's no better person that can take those punches.
Yeah, I think that he is one of the strongest and most steadfast people ever, and he didn't need this. He could have just been a rich guy living in a golden penthouse in New York, building hotels, and retired.
Mm-hmm.
But look, he actually seriously cares about the country and what's happening to it. And when people say, well, no, he doesn't, this is all ego, well, then you wouldn't do all this stuff.
He would be gone. He would be living in some other country right now. He would go back and live in Eastern Europe someplace with his wife's family in a palace someplace. He wouldn't be dealing with this stuff. And the Democrats, they would love that. That would be their greatest hope.
Meanwhile, they are trying to pull Joe Biden's fat out of the fire. Gavin Newsom is walking around and saying the greasiest, stupid stuff ever. Like, this guy, this is a person who takes fibbing to a new level. Gavin Newsom said Biden's age is why, quote, he's been so successful, unquote. I would like to know successful at what, other than, is age what the Chinese were investing in and the others around the world, the Ukrainian oligarchs, when they gave bribes to his family that they laundered? Was it because, we really like his age?
Well, that's an interesting one, because if you look at his first major race, it was also funded by a Chinese nonprofit. But anyways, that's what it must be. It must be they're very interested in both sides of it.
No, absolutely. Meanwhile, Democrats are scoffing at the Biden family influence peddling evidence, which is voluminous. It is so much, and it's so funny how they have decided that the standards that they were vehement, that they were trying to apply to President Trump with the fake influence peddling stories that they tried to push forward, when there's real influence peddling evidence, they just say, well, it's not really evidence. It's just sworn testimony. It's just they just have a fluid definition of it, and then they march out this guy Dan Goldman, who he puts the liar and lawyer. That's for sure. He comes out and he just says, well, there's nothing real here. It's 12,000 pages of bank records, and none of them trace back to Joe Biden, as if you can't figure that one out, when literally everybody in his family has received something. And then money went from them to him, paying back loans that were never made. And there's no evidence of it. It's just, this must be the type of lying that makes the mafia guys think, how does this guy get away with this? I tried that. That didn't work at all. They got me on the RICO statutes. That's it.
Well, the whole situation with like them saying that, it looks bad, but he's just a harmless old man. I have to tell you, I genuinely feel that if you're not allowed if you're not have the ability to handle classified documents, you don't have the capabilities or qualifications to run for any political office, dog catcher, let alone the highest office of the land.
Yes. No, that's exactly right.
This is unacceptable. He literally, if he would have done this at any other job, had classified information, his butt would be in a federal prison stay for the next 10 years. But it seems like once you get to a certain point within the political machine, that there's a two-tier justice. And all I'm out here advocating is that equality under the law. If you did it, you're held responsible for it. And that's the America that I'm going to live under.
By the way, Representative Ken Buck from Colorado introduced a resolution in Congress today. I just saw it. This is breaking news, to call on President Joe Biden's cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, the first step in the process of removing a president from office.
Wow.
And his resolution presses Vice President Kamala Harris to convene the cabinet and declare what is obvious to a horrified nation, that the president is unable to successfully discharge the duties and powers of his office. And this is what the 25th Amendment in part was created for. It was also in part like if a president is truly incapacitated. When Ronald Reagan was shot, that was the dawn of this amendment. But it was also written so that if a president's just, too mentally gone to actually perform his duties, that you would have this option. And Joe Biden has had so many of these. He got Egypt and Mexico confused in the Palestinian situation recently.
Yeah.
He said he was speaking to Francois Mitterrand and Helmut Kohl from France and Germany, respectively, who Mitterrand's been dead since '96. This is the type of stuff that's so blatantly obvious. The guy receives the presidential briefing at 10 a.m.
Yeah. Well, he's also, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe he has taken the most amount of vacation of any other president,
more than he's been on duty.
Exactly. And like the right and the left, and I don't know about you, but I've had family members and loved ones that have suffered from dementia.
Yeah.
And I see things that are very, very similar.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm not saying this as a political quibble against him. I genuinely feel that this is elder abuse at this time.
Oh, it's obvious. And the thing is, there are people who they're on TV so much, right?
Yeah.
That there was a doctor who didn't have any political motivation, says, I don't really care about politics at all, but I can watch the videos over the last 3 years, and I can tell you, you can literally measure the number of times that he has pauses, gaffes, times he forgets things entirely, and the coping mechanisms that are used. And he said, you can measure it. You can measure the rate of decline, and it is not going to get better. He's not going to be better a year from now.
And ultimately, my question is, if the moment arrives that the president would need to make a decision that would save the life or cost the life of millions of Americans, could this president make that decision? And I genuinely do not believe that he can.
Now, it's very hard to say with a straight face to anybody that he could. And this is while he also is responsible for creating some crises that are engulfing our country, specifically the border. Now, there's a couple of things I wanted to bring forward here because now apparently a majority of Americans do want a border wall. And we know that it takes more than a wall actually to secure the border, but more than half of Americans support a border wall. But 46% oppose it, which obviously there's a lot of people that still don't understand what's happening on the border. No. 61% of respondents support keeping asylum applicants in Mexico while their claims are processed. The so-called Remain in Mexico policy makes perfect sense to 61% of Americans. And so we're in a different era. We've jumped the shark, and now people see this as the top issue. And in fact, it's polling as the top issue in election after election after election. And today, or soon, I believe, let's see, on Thursday, both Joe Biden and President Trump are going to be visiting the border on the same day. I think this will be very interesting to see the comparison, because Joe Biden essentially is blaming Republicans for not giving him enough money to do something he caused by signing executive orders that reversed all the policies that existed in 2021 in January that were keeping the numbers at that time coming into the country. And remember not without a completed wall, still at a tenth of what they are now, 10% what they are now.
And I find it very interesting that during the election, they said that it was racist and kids in cages and AOC was crying and all of these different things that were happening and going on. But if you look, the kids in cages thing is still happening. The separations of families is still happening. And matter of fact,
on a larger scale, for sure.
Well, not only on a larger scale, but also President Biden has been building border walls. If it doesn't work, if it's unpopular, why are you continuing to build these border walls? So I find it very, very interesting. And when the next or when President Trump is reelected, I genuinely hope that they decide to take some of those defense budget dollars and migrate them to the border, the southern border wall, and for us to be able to finish this thing off and to enact those steps that we need in order to control our border. Because without a border, we don't have a country.
And there's no reason to pass new immigration laws reforming that system if you don't have a border, because the laws don't mean anything.
Right.
They're the reason why you would follow an immigration law and get a visa and all that kind of stuff, is that there's actually not a totally penalty-free illegal alternative.
Well, and that's my biggest issue with this is we are a nation of laws and we are equal under that. In a country where we do not have laws, we live lawlessly, then we are all unequal. And truly, I feel, and I think it's been said in the comment section below, that the Democrats don't follow laws. And I feel like they truly feel like they are above. And I think that it's time that we correct them. No one is above the law.
And there are real consequences of this. Of course, we know what happened at the University at Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
In Athens. That girl was killed by a Venezuelan illegal immigrant who was released, and then ended up going and killing her just this past week. There's numerous other examples, hardened criminals that have been released into the country. This girl was at University of Georgia, was just she was bludgeoned to death while on a morning jog.
Mm-hmm.
In what's considered a very safe town, actually. But it's a town that fancies itself as a sanctuary city. And the consequences, I think, are dire at this point. And it's more than just, the criminals that get in, because when you don't know who's coming into your country, or you don't do anything about the people who do come in that shouldn't be here, then you are going to flood the country with more criminals than we know what to do with. And you're going to see this happen. But on top of that, there are some winners because of this system. Apparently, federal agencies are, the way it's being put here, won an 8.7% profit from the resident population of 2.9 million refugees and asylum seekers. And this is a great way to jack up your agency's revenues. Meanwhile, state and local governments have taken a 7.3% loss, a $21.4 billion hit, because they have had to bear all these costs of people flooding into their cities. And we're seeing even sanctuary cities starting to squeal and complain about this and telling Joe Biden to cut it out, which is interesting.
Well, and it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you're aware of what's going on in El Salvador, but El Salvador used to be one of the most dangerous places on the planet. And they have a new president that came in, and he basically started to jail all of the criminals. And I'm not saying that everything that the president of El Salvador is doing is great, but ultimately, if you're a gang member, if you're breaking the law, if you're doing those things, you need to be held accountable for it. And it's a shame, because it's not just that one story about that student who was injured. I mean, there was a situation where those illegal immigrants beat up police officers in New York City were released less than 24 hours. And then I can't remember what state that they were in, but they left the state of New York, which they weren't allowed to do. And then they committed another crime, breaking into another place. And I know that there are people who are legitimately trying to enter our country legally and going through the right process. And all of those people who want to be red-blooded Americans and live in this land of opportunity, they're being pushed to the absolute back of the line for these people who are cutting. And that's what we need to fix first and foremost. I mean, we need, and it's a really, really bad situation. And
Well, and actually, it's so bad
yeah,
that the last two things I wanted to mention here before we wrap up is that it's also fueling a fentanyl trade.
Yeah.
That is the one we started talking about with Measure 110. Peter Schweitzer, who is a investigative reporter, has written a book called Blood Money: Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. China is the source of the fentanyl precursors that are manufactured into these drugs in Mexico and then brought across the border. They don't spawn along the side of I-5. They actually come across the border, and he details, he says China's control from start to finish in the U.S. They even have Chinese cartels that operate parts of Oregon that control and bring also human slaves in to work for them. And so I just posted that link. Everybody should check that out. I've gotten that book. I'm going to read it. And I think it's something that leads to this final story, which is that there's a congressman, Scott Perry of Pennsylvania, who says Republicans should cancel Biden's State of the Union address over the border crisis and send him a message. You're not welcome here until you fix our border, period. We don't want to hear from you. We want to hear that you have taken care of securing the border to our satisfaction.
My only problem with that is I genuinely feel that he would want to cancel it anyways because he's not capable of standing up and doing a speech for 10, 15
That's
minutes.
possible. Yeah, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario, but it's like he would become more exposed. But I also don't want a room full of people applauding for this mentally deficient president who refuses, whether it's him or the people truly running the country. He doesn't deserve to have a room full of people applauding this disaster he's delivered for us. So I'm conflicted too, but I get the sentiment. It's like we got to stop pretending like this is okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Humanitarian disaster. We really need to come to a conclusion quickly for it.
So let's wrap up just by talking a little bit about youth. So are they engaging with these issues? Is this something that we're going to be able to move the needle this year?
I sure hope so. I mean, we're going to be working in every major race that we can get volunteers in. So if you've got a candidate that wants young Republicans involved, please get in contact with us. We've got lots of links up in the sidebar chat or www.yro.gop, and that will get us to our website. And there's lots of ways to contact us on that. I think that the youth of the party is full of energy. We're fully motivated. We want to see big changes in this election season, and we need your guys' help doing that. So, if you have a young person, invite them to come check out the Young Republicans. If you have a few extra dollars that you could send to the Young Republicans for our organization, all of that money goes purely into our campaigns and training of the young people of the party, and we would really appreciate that, and it'll double and triple the value of that growing the youth of the party. And lastly, if you guys ever want to come out and hang out with us, we do a weekly Zoom call on Tuesday nights, and come out and join the Young Republicans.
Sounds great. Well, I guess I'm a senior Young Republican, isn't there? Or alumnus, or there's some status?
We're actually creating an alumni division. Sarah, our vice chair, she is aging out. We're starting an alumni division. We want to capture all of those those contacts and those lesson learns, because we feel that learning political lessons, as expensive as it is, we might as well utilize those political lessons so we don't have to keep paying the same price over and over. So we look forward to inviting you out and sharing some of those golden stories and everything that you bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And being inspired by the young folks that want to fight hard and do something about it. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining me here on the show tonight. I really appreciate it. I've posted all the links to the Young Republicans here in the feed, and everyone needs to share this with everyone you can. And Stephen, we look forward to having you on again. You know, there were 10 things we could have talked about that would have been just as interesting. And maybe we'll then have you back and talk about some of those next time. But thanks again for joining us here tonight. I really appreciate it.
Anytime. It's my pleasure. Give me a call.
And thanks everyone for watching and listening. Please share the show with everyone you can. And we'll be back tomorrow with the next episode of The Captive Audience. It'll be with me and then probably some mystery guests that I haven't figured out yet, but it's still see, I've enticed you. So come back tomorrow and check out what we've got. Plus, you know, there will be a ton more news.